Welcome. This is session number 5. Okay, session number 5. Here we go. We've already discussed quite a bit of stuff, but this session we want to talk about facts or faith. We've already covered quite a bit of material. In session number 1, we said both creation and evolution are what? Religion. They're both religions. That's exactly right. Session number 2, we said the earth is not old. The earth is very young. Hey, you remember in session 3 when God originally made the world, he said it was good. When God originally made it, it was very, very good. And then last session, session number 4, we said dinosaurs didn't live millions of years ago. They've always lived with man. Yes, they've always lived with man. Now we want to talk about facts versus faith.
These past 8 months, I have systematically mopped up your mental diarrhea in the hopes that any fellow rationalist who watches these videos will be better prepared to confront the insidious fundamentalists that parrot your garbage. These videos are available in the link on this big bright annotation right here. Yes, this one. The one that you're staring right at. Click on it if you have not yet seen the first 4 commentaries. A playlist will open up in your browser. Don't be scared, it won't turn off this video, this will simply open up a new page. If you haven't yet, I strongly encourage you to watch the first 4 episodes. Also, as you may have noticed, I've abandoned the practice of dividing my videos into segments due to high demand. My subscribers have spoken, and I obey. So without further ado, I present the long-awaited penultimate Eric Hovind commentary. Enjoy.
I don't want to scare you guys. I know I got a lot of textbooks up here, and it's because I like science. We actually collect science textbooks.
You would do well to do more than just collect them, Eric. Reading them might help cure your scientific illiteracy. But even then, if you really want to keep up to date with current scientific knowledge, I'd recommend reading peer-reviewed papers in respected scientific journals. But I know that you won't. Why should you? You make millions by feeding lies to the gullible in order to sate their hunger for self-satisfaction, and you don't need up-to-date information to do that. In fact, judging by the content that you've presented thus far, I don't think that any of those textbooks are any younger than 20 years old. Your rhetorical strategy of presenting an image of academic rigor thus falls flat on its face.
This is just a little bit of our collection of the science textbooks that we collect. Yes, we are geeks. Thank you very much. But I want you to look at this next picture, and I want you to tell me what you see. You guys at home, pay attention and tell me what you see here. Okay, what do you see right there? How many of you see an old woman? How many of you see a young woman? How many of you see both? Oh, kind of confusing there. Just try this one out. What is this? First one to tell me what it is wins a special prize.
Old people.
Old people. Are you sure? It's not 2 Mexicans? It might be 2 Mexicans, one playing a guitar. See that? Which one is that? Ah. It all depends on your perspective, doesn't it? It all depends on the perspective there. How about this? Are the stairs right side up or are they upside down? What do you guys think? Right side up or upside down? It all depends on your perspective, doesn't it? How about this one? What do you see there? How many of you see a bunny? How many of you see a duck? How many of you see both of them? You know, it really all depends on our perspective to tell us exactly what we're going to see. You know, we love science. We really do. I got a D+ in school in science.
Somehow, Eric, I don't doubt that.
So did really well there. And we really do enjoy science. However, we've discovered that a lot of faith has actually crept into the science books.
Oh, really? Do tell.
And we don't want religion in the schools, do we? So we got to get faith out of the science books. Take a look at this. This is a picture of the Grand Canyon. Cool. Well, there's no question the Grand Canyon is a big old giant hole in the ground, but I got a question for you. How did the Grand Canyon actually get there? This textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River has carved out the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Hold on. We got to think about this for a second. Now, it is a fact that the Grand Canyon does exist. Is anybody going to argue with that fact? No, the Grand Canyon is a big old hole in the ground, but how did it get there? Now we've got an evolutionist interpretation and a creationist interpretation. The evolutionist says, oh, it formed slowly with a little bit of water and lots of time. The creationist says, no, it formed quickly with a lot of water and a little bit of time. Here we have a fact and two different interpretations of the fact. The problem is, many times evolutionists tie their faith-based interpretation of the fact to the actual fact.
Wrong already, Eric. When you say that evolutionists, by which I presume you mean rationalists, posit that the Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon over a period spanning millions of years, they're not interpreting anything. At least not in the sense that you're implying they are. Eric wants us to believe that the scientific method can be summed up by looking at a particular phenomenon and attributing it to a preconceived bias. But this is not what scientists do. This is what creationists do, and they openly admit it.
If we're going to argue biblically and use this as our authority, it would be very unwise to go evidence for evidence and say, yeah, I'll set my Bible on the shelf and I'll meet you in, quote, the scientific realm. Because
unwise and unbiblical.
Can you say projection? Consider the following analogy. Here's a picture that most people are familiar with. Eric wants us to believe that creationists interpret this picture to be an illustration of two people kissing, and that scientists interpret this picture as a lamp. The former may be true, but the latter certainly is not. What scientists really do in this analogy is they calculate the percentages that certain colors occupy the image, the saturation, the hue, and the contrast of the image, and other independently verifiable units of information colloquially referred to as facts. These facts are then incorporated into a cohesive model that has explanatory power, or a theory. In the case of this analogy, the theory might be that this image depicts nothing in particular, and that its contents are meant to be superimposed by the viewer. Following from this definition, the piece can be categorized as an abstract work of art. So now that we're a bit more familiar with the scientific method, let's take a look at the independently verifiable and indisputable facts of the Grand Canyon. Yes, Eric, it does exist, but no conclusions can be drawn from this alone. For the purposes of this video, we will be focusing on just one fact that is relevant to the age of the Grand Canyon: its shape. This, of course, is only one disproof of this favorite claim of the creationists. For a splendid and thorough debunking of all the creationist lies relevant to the Grand Canyon, I'm going to have to direct you to Wildwood Claire-One's Geodesy series. This one disproof, however, is sufficient to debunk the claim that the global flood immediately carved out the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon's shape does not at all suggest that it was formed quickly. The steep curves that make up the canyon indicate a very slow progression of the river that created this meandering body. Meandering is a consequence of the gradual erosion of flat land, as with the Colorado Plateau. Rushing floodwaters will never create a meandering pattern like the one observed at the Grand Canyon. What they will do, however, is cut a straight path through the land that they flood. Watch as Donald Prothero, a professor of geology at Occidental College who has done field research at the Grand Canyon for over 35 years, demonstrates this simple fact to a group of creationists.
If your post-flood waters drain off, they're going to drain off and form a sharp, straight canyon. That's simple physics. Just release the water gently onto the surface, and as we let it go, we'll see what it does. There you go. So porous, it drains in there pretty fast. Well, hardly enough to even get much of a call. We got a grain flow.
Amazing.
But it's also very straight. That's typical flood situations all around the world. This is simple geomorphology. This is the way we look at the landforms of the Earth and watch them evolve in real time.
So no, Eric. The fact that the erosion pattern meanders indicates that it's impossible for a single flood event to have carved out the Grand Canyon, but fits perfectly with the well-established fact that only a gradual process consisting of uplift and erosion could produce this structure.
Give you another example. The Earth today has layers of sedimentary rock. Nobody's going to argue with that. But how did those layers get there? The evolutionist says they formed slowly over millions of years. Creationists say they were laid down very quickly during Noah's flood. So which one is true?
Once again, let's turn to the facts. We know that sedimentary layers exist. We also know that while some layers of sediment can form relatively quickly, other layers take enormous amounts of time to develop. Take chalk, for instance, which forms when the shells of certain microscopic protozoans sink to the bottom of the ocean and coalesce into sediment. There are no known alternative naturalistic means by which chalk can form. But most importantly, a single layer of chalk forms at a steady rate of 2 inches every 1,000 years. Because of this constraint, we should expect to find layers of chalk that are no more than a foot tall if the Earth really is 6,000 years old. Have we ever found any? Well, yes. These are the needles. They're made primarily of chalk. They stand over 100 feet tall. These are the famous white cliffs at Dover, and they're also made of chalk. They stand over 300 feet tall. This is Beachy Head. It stands at about 530 feet tall. It's over 1,000 feet thick, and it is also made of chalk. Of course, chalk is just one of many different types of sediment that can form slowly. Others include sandstone grains that are cemented together, limestone, and clay. In addition, a global flood would not have formed the diverse array of layers that we see in the geological column. It simply would have added a layer that spans the globe. To this day, no such layer has been found.
Now here's what you got to watch for, okay? Evolutionists are always trying to erase the line between the fact and the interpretation of the fact. They actually want to try to make it seem like their interpretation of the fact is actually part of the actual fact, when in fact it is not. Okay, so that's what you got to watch for, and so we're going to be doing some watching. Let's look at this line right here in this textbook. The Colorado River has cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Oh, hold on. Oh, is that a fact? Or is that an interpretation of the fact? Is that a faith-based statement there? That's a faith-based statement.
No, it isn't. But let's see what you had to say next. I recommend everyone watching right now to tie your hands behind your back. I gave you fair warning. I won't be held responsible for the injuries caused to your skulls by the face palms that you're about to perform. Are your hands secured? Roll tape.
We actually did a creation minute on the Grand Canyon. This is really cool. Check this out. Welcome to Creation Minute. I'm Eric Hovind. The Grand Canyon. 277 miles long, 10 to 18 miles wide, and more than a mile deep. That's impressive. In the bottom is the Colorado River. You know, some scientists suggest the Colorado River formed the Grand Canyon over millions of years.
Some of them? No. All of them.
But take a look at these facts to see it from a different perspective. The Colorado River exits the canyon 1,800 feet above sea level. It enters the canyon 2,800 feet above sea level, and the top of Grand Canyon is 7,000 feet above sea level. So you tell me, did the river flow uphill for millions of years to carve out the Grand Canyon? Or is it possible that the Grand Canyon is the result of Noah's flood? To learn more about creation, visit us at creationminute.com.
No thanks, Eric. I'm not interested in visiting your shit pit. Although if I do manage to send the truth defenders running for the hills, I just might come back and debunk your Creation Minute series. Seeing as I'm the first person on YouTube to systematically follow your shit trail, I reserve the right to shove my chainsaw of reason just a little bit deeper up your ass. That is, of course, if my subscribers are agreeable. Back to the matter at hand. The Colorado River, like all rivers, does not flow uphill. No scientist claims that it does. What the overwhelming majority of geologists agree on is that the Colorado River ran through a plateau and eroded a small valley. Then, over hundreds of thousands of years, it uplifted the plateau, collecting in a deep channel that then flowed over the plateau. It eroded the plateau again, uplifted it again, and continued the process for millions of years. At no point did the Colorado River have to flow uphill.
Did the Colorado River form the Grand Canyon? No, it didn't.
Yes, it did.
There's a couple points you need to see about the Grand Canyon. Number one, you need to remember that the top of Grand Canyon is higher than the bottom. How many of you guys knew that already? Okay, you got that part figured out? Okay. Second thing you need to keep in mind is that the river runs through the bottom. You guys got that figured out with no help? All right. Another thing you need to think about is the fact that the top of Grand Canyon is higher than where the river enters the canyon by 4,000 feet. rivers, they don't flow uphill. That river did not make that canyon. It's impossible.
Your greatest strength, Eric, and indeed perhaps your only strength, is your ability to concoct, or in this case, parrot, a straw man, and then knock it down. Once again, an upward flow in the Colorado River is neither necessary nor believed to have carved out the Grand Canyon. Uplift and erosion, Eric. Uplift and erosion.
The Colorado River could not have formed Grand Canyon. So here they say that the Colorado River formed Grand Canyon. It cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Is that a fact or is that a faith-based statement? It's faith-based, isn't it? And we don't want faith-based statements in the book, do we? So we're going to have to take that out. We certainly don't want that in our textbook. Okay, let's go to another one here, because that is definitely based on faith. What about the geologic column? You guys ever heard of the geologic column before? You got all these layers of sediment, the Cretaceous and the Jurassic Park named after the Jurassic layer, and you got all these different layers to the rock. Hey, are they really different ages?
Hell yes, they are. Different sedimentary layers form under dramatically different conditions, and some do so at extraordinarily slow rates. Remember the chalk, clay, and limestone, Eric?
See, it was back during the early 1800s that each layer of rock was given a name, an age, and an index fossil. They said they knew how old the layer was way before carbon dating ever came around.
Carbon dating? Carbon dating isn't used to determine the age of minerals for reasons that should be obvious to all but the most indolent of fuckwits. Still, this is a great opportunity to bring in a special guest to explain, in meticulous detail, why carbon dating isn't used on minerals. Eric thinks that we can carbon date rocks. What's your response to this, Potholer 54?
Oi, Hovind! We can't carbon date this! There's no f***ing carbon in it!
Ah, I just love a classic. Radiometric dating is a convenient method of cross-confirming the known age of a sedimentary layer, but isn't exclusively necessary. In theory, all that one needs is the rate at which certain minerals accumulate and the size of the layer.
Back in the 1800s, they went ahead and gave it an age, how old they thought that it was. Now, you got to understand, the geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionists, okay?
You crazy creationist.
I just couldn't leave out that nugget, especially after having just included Potholer. Go on, Eric.
And it can only be found one place in the entire world. One place in the whole world you can find the geologic column. Guess where it's at? Right here in the textbooks. That is the only place in the entire world you can find the geologic column. It doesn't exist anywhere. This textbook admits it. If there were a column of sediments, unfortunately no such column exists, they admit we don't have the evidence. You really don't have anything called a geologic column.
Here you go again, Eric, exercising that strength of yours that I just mentioned. No one has ever claimed that the geological column is a single structure. The entire column is spread out across the earth, but the single rock formation that you claim is touted to exist by rationalists is not real. It is a model that has tremendous explanatory power in its respective field. In my own field of study, we have a model called the celestial sphere. This model posits that all heavenly bodies are equidistant from the earth and lie on a sphere that rotates around the earth. While this obviously isn't an accurate representation of reality, the celestial sphere has tremendous predictive power. Notice that there are two disks in this model. One is the celestial equator and the other is the ecliptic. Where the disks intersect are the equinoxes, and the points on the ecliptic farthest from the celestial equator are the solstices. This model has been used to predict when those dates occur, as well as the positions of the stars relative to Polaris, which stands at the north celestial pole, hence its nickname, the North Star. The geological column, like the celestial sphere, is still in use today, but not because anyone thinks that these things are real. These are simply useful models. To say that we've never found the geological column is to showcase an astounding magnitude of ignorance, even when considering the pitifully low expectations that I have for you, Eric.
If it did exist in one place, it would be 100 miles thick. Wow! So the geologic column, is that fact or is that faith?
Neither. It's a model.
It's faith. And we don't want faith in the textbooks, do we? No. So what do we need to do? We need to take that out of there, don't we? We do not want faith in the textbooks. How about this? There are layers to the earth. Nobody's going to question that. But are the layers different ages? If each layer was laid down slowly over millions of years, wouldn't you expect to see some erosion marks in between the layers? But we don't. All we see is nice, smooth layers that have been laid down.
Erosion is defined as the process by which soil and rock are removed from the Earth's surface by external processes, such as wind or water flow, and then transported to other locations. Sedimentation is the deposition or accumulation of matter via natural processes. So no, Eric, we don't expect to find signs of erosion between sedimentary layers because sedimentation and erosion are completely opposite processes.
They tell us these layers are all different ages. You got 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, 400 million years old. Problem, they have found Polystrata fossils. Fossils of trees running up through the different layers. Well, if you got a tree that's running up through all your different layers, well, could they be millions of years different in age? No, they couldn't. Here's a petrified tree standing straight up out of the ground at Yellowstone National Park. You ever seen one of them trees growing, the petrified kind? They're actually made out of stone. They grow right up out of the ground. Yeah. No, that doesn't happen, does it? These Polystrata fossils show us that those layers are not different ages. Sometimes, get this, they even find the trees upside down running through those different layers. How many of you have seen one of those trees growing outside? The upside down tree, the roots are up, you got to dig for the apple? They're crazy, man.
First of all, I'd just like to point out that the term polystrata is a term used only by creationists and is not recognized by any scientific disciplines that I am aware of. Secondly, I'd also like to point out that this supposed problem has been solved by J.W. Dawson in the mid-19th century in his book, Akkadian Geology. And finally, I'd like to remind you of what I said earlier in the video. While some layers of sediment take enormous amounts of time to develop, other layers of sediment can form relatively quickly. Chalk, limestone, and clay take ages to develop, but silt, and in the cases of these trees, swamp deposits, take only a few decades to develop. What creationists never seem to understand is that not all sedimentary layers develop at the same rate, so it's no wonder that they're surprised that some trees occupy different levels of sediment. What would be surprising is if a tree were found inside of a chalk deposit, but what would be even more surprising is if a creationist actually did some research. So how do creationists try to explain their so-called polystrata fossils?
How do you explain this? Well, a worldwide flood would explain that. No problem.
Of course. For theists, an unknown is answered with a God of the Gaps argument. For creationists, an unknown is answered with a flood of the gaps. Notice how he just said that a flood explains this, and I quote, no problem, but then he doesn't proceed to explain how the flood explains this, no problem.
But those layers are not different ages. You're welcome to say, and they tell us, oh, those layers are different ages. But is that based on fact or is that based on faith? Faith. That's based on faith. And we don't want faith in the textbook, do we? No. So what do we need to do? We need to take that out of the textbook because we don't want that in our textbook, do we? No way. Check this out. If you ask an evolutionist, hey, how do you tell how old that layer of rock is? He'll say, that's a great question. We can tell the age of the layer of rock based on what fossils are found in it. They actually say that in here. We know the age of the layer based on the fossils. Then if you say, well, hang on, how do you know the age of the fossil? They say, oh, we know the age of the fossil based on what rock layer it's found in.
Both statements are half true, but two half-truths don't make a whole truth. While a fossil's age can be determined from the rock layer and vice versa, multiple methods of radiometric dating are used to independently cross-confirm an age. Thermoluminescence is also occasionally used.
Wait a minute. You know the age of the layer based on the fossil, and you know the age of the fossil based on the layer. Isn't that just simply circular reasoning?
Here we have another combination of Eric's greatest strength and projection. To illustrate the latter, consider this age-old argument. The Bible is the Word of God because it says so, and the Bible is true because it's the Word of God. If you think that Eric doesn't really hold to that sort of reasoning, think again.
I'm going to always go back to the circular argument that God reveals. How do I know? God reveals. How do I know? God reveals.
Can you say projection?
That's all it is. Here it is in the textbook. Page 306, they date the rock by the fossil. Page 307, they date the fossil by the rock.
We can discern the temperature of a star based on its color, and we can determine a star's color just by knowing its temperature. Just because a process is reversible does not mean that it is circular. As long as there is an independent means of substantiating both methods, it isn't circular. In the case of stars, luminosity can determine both temperature and color, and in the case of dating strata and fossils, that can be done with other dating methods.
They tell us they know how old these things are. Is that based on fact or is that based on faith? That's faith. We don't want faith in the textbook, do we? So what do we need to do? We need to take that out of there. Yeah, we don't need faith in our textbooks, all right? How about this one? They say dinosaurs lived 70 million years ago. Well, you're welcome to believe that. But is that a fact or is that based on faith? That is definitely based on faith. Let me get there. There's my dinosaur right there. Next page. We don't want faith in the textbook, do we? No. So what do we need to do about dinosaurs being millions of years old? We need to take that out of there. Yeah, we don't want faith in the textbooks because, man, they really don't want that. Come on, they have found dinosaur bone with fresh blood inside.
No, they haven't. Don't you creationists ever get tired of touting the same arguments? The event that Eric is referencing is the shoddy work of a Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who, while investigating the fossilized traces of organic materials inside of a dinosaur bone, sensationalized her ongoing research for the media before she'd even published in the peer review. It goes without saying that such practice is unethical and unscientific, and Miss Schweitzer was consequently given a well-deserved bitch slap by the scientific community for it. I mention her shoddy performance as a warning to prospective scientists to not let their hopes of fame cloud their judgment, as it was precisely this sort of carelessness that resulted in the Nebraska Man ordeal, which creationists still jump onto to this day. In her final publication on the matter in 2005, Miss Schweitzer made no mention of having found any blood in the dinosaur bone. What she did find, to her credit, was soft tissue, which I will discuss in a moment.
The dinosaurs did not live millions of years ago. They have found dinosaur bones that are not even petrified. They haven't turned to stone. Whoa! And you want me to believe that it's 70 million years old? Now we've got a problem, okay? I don't believe they are millions of years old. It's interesting. A couple years ago when they found these fresh dinosaur bones and they were not fossilized, they never, ever questioned how old the bones might be and said, well, maybe the dinosaurs didn't live millions of years ago. That thought never crossed their mind.
And the reason that it never crossed their minds is because it didn't pass the test of Occam's razor. But I digress. First of all, these dinosaur bones were not fresh. The only remains of the actual organism that were found was the soft tissue that I just mentioned, and the reason that the soft tissue survived was because the dinosaur had been buried under particularly exceptional circumstances. In Schweitzer's paper, she noted that the dinosaur had been buried rapidly and that it remained deep underground. These two circumstances prevented oxidation, decomposition, and water from destroying the tissue, which she also noted was found only inside of unbroken bones. The tissue had essentially been inside of a sealed vacuum. The ridiculous sentiment that dinosaurs lived with humans is unnecessary to explain this phenomenon, but it does serve to illustrate that creationists love to pick at the straw rather than the bale.
Instead, they said, I wonder if that means that fossilization takes a lot longer than we thought.
Here we go again with your greatest strength. I've just explained what the scientists have actually discovered, so I won't repeat myself.
They missed the whole point. No, the point is dinosaurs didn't live millions of years ago. Now, Charles Darwin, who we give credit for coming up with the idea of evolution, even though he kind of stole it from his grandpa, but anyway, we give him credit for coming up with this idea of evolution. When he was out of Bible college, Yes, that's right. He went to school to be a preacher. But anyway, he got out of Bible college and he set sail on the HMS Beagle. Went around the world for 5 years. One of the places that he stopped on his trip around the world was the Galapagos Islands. When he stopped there on the Galapagos Islands, Charles Darwin found that there were a variety of finches on that island. He counted 14 different varieties of finches on that island. And Charlie had a thought. He said, you know, I'll bet you all those finches had a common ancestor. I'll bet he was right. I can even tell you what it was. Finch. But Charlie came up with a different idea. He said, maybe the finch and the eagle are related. Maybe the finch, the eagle, and the earthworm are related. Maybe the finch, the eagle, the earthworm, and the trees are related. Maybe I'm related to the finch. Whoa! Later on in his book, The Origin of Species, he says, it is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants throughout all time and space should be related to each other. Whoa, 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 whoa. Is that a fact or is that based on faith? That is definitely a faith statement.
No, it isn't. We know that we're related to all other animals because, like it or not, Eric, you ingest and metabolize other organisms, so you are, by definition, an animal.
There is no evidence that man and plants, or animals and plants, are related. There's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Animals and plants are comprised of eukaryotic cells, so by definition they are both eukaryotes. You and a plant are both eukaryotes. You may have diversified at the taxonomic level of kingdom, but that does not change the fact that our ancestor descended from the same organism that gave rise to plants. Not only does our morphology confirm this, but genetics does also, and only a self-centered, megalomaniacal, solipsistic adherent of fundamentalist Christianity could howl in disgust at one of the most beautiful revelations in human history, that all of life on Earth is ultimately related. That you not only refuse to see this out of a misplaced sense of uniqueness, but also consider the thought with such obvious disgust, speaks volumes about your ego, which I imagine to be more misplaced than your father's prostate during shower time.
So we don't want faith in the textbooks, do we? Now, so what should we do with that? We need to take that out of the textbooks. We certainly do not want faith in our textbooks. I mean, we got to be above reproach here, okay? Now, Charles Darwin observed what is called microevolution. Micro means, come on now, micro means, yeah, micro means small. So Charles Darwin observed microevolution. We looked at that in session number 1. But then he jumped to the conclusion, well, maybe everything's related. He saw dogs producing a variety of dogs, roses producing a variety of roses, and he thought maybe they're all related. And its common ancestor was a rock.
Again with the strawman. Let's begin with the micro and macroevolution bullshit, because I want to deal with this once and for all. The distinction that creationists see between micro and macroevolution is illusory. An offspring will have a genotype that contains alleles from both its mother and father, as well as alleles that are unique to that offspring. This is microevolution. No child is a perfect copy of its parents. But as successive generations reproduce, the allele frequencies begin to diverge until eventually organisms with a common ancestor are no longer able to interbreed with one another. This is textbook macroevolution, and has been observed on no less than 30 occasions thus far. And incidentally, no one claims that we came from a rock, because rocks do not reproduce. You're attempting to concoct yet another parody of abiogenesis, but seeing as I dealt with this in session 1, I'll refrain from beating a dead horse. I'll just end this by saying that abiogenesis has nothing to do with evolution, and Darwin certainly never claimed that any living organism came from a rock.
Oh, come on! Hey, here's how they define evolution in the textbooks. I love this. They confuse the kids as much as they can. Definition number 1, evolution is change over time. Is that really what they mean? Later on it says definition number 2. Oh no, evolution is a change in living things over time.
I don't know if it's ever occurred to you, Eric, but words have multiple definitions. The word tax, for instance, can mean an estimate that determines something's value. It can also mean a levy that is demanded by the government. You and your family's inability to recognize this simple fact would go a long way to explain your father's current situation. I digress. Like the word tax, evolution has multiple meanings as well. Its nominal meaning is change over time, but within a scientific context, unless otherwise specified, it's almost always defined as the change in allele frequencies over successive generations. Just because you're confused doesn't mean that everyone else is.
Well, hold on. Now you're down to just the last two stages of evolution. You remember the 6 types of evolution that we covered? Cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar and planetary evolution, organic evolution. They didn't mention those in there, did they?
You're a moron. There aren't 6 different types of evolution. These are fictitious machinations made by your father to distort the truth. In astronomy, we refer to the period of a star's existence as its life cycle. What's made clear, however, is that biological terms like life cycle are used as analogies because, like the geological column and the celestial sphere, they're convenient. In any case, anything that changes can and has been labeled with the term evolution. I can refer to the change in government policies and institutions over the centuries as political evolution. I can refer to the history of Tom Riddle's upbringing as the evolution of Lord Voldemort. In the same way, the word evolution can be imposed on anything that changes its original state, so referring to the so-called 6 types of evolution is redundant. What's universally recognized in science is that evolution, unless otherwise specified, refers specifically to the change in allele frequencies over successive generations.
If it's just the change in living things over time. Then definition number 3, evolution can be defined as a change in species over time. Well, now you're down to what I believe. Sure, microevolution takes place, and there's lots and lots of evidence of that. But they say evolution is just change over time. Is that fact, or is that faith? Faith. It's more faith in the textbooks.
Not faith, definition. Evolution is defined in Merriam-Webster under different contexts so that dickheads like you can refer to it at your leisure.
What are we going to do about this, guys? We need to take it out. Yeah, let's get rid of that because we don't want faith in the textbooks. Okay, so we got all this faith in the textbooks. Here's the problem. The real meaning of evolution kind of gets slipped in under the door as kids continue to be, quote, educated. And if a kid objects to evolution teaching and says, I don't believe that's true, well, then they're kind of ridiculed. They're told, you just don't understand science. That's your problem.
That's your problem, Eric. If a child doesn't understand evolutionary theory, and many of them don't, then a teacher will usually explain it to them until they get it. You, apparently, never got it, so I'm not surprised that you reject it. The only people who are ridiculed are pompous charlatans like you whose consequent reception of scorn and ridicule are well-deserved.
When really I think it's that we do have a grasp of reality. They say variations cause evolution. Do variations actually cause evolution?
Yes, that is the definition of evolution.
Here it is in a textbook. They say, look at this divergent evolution. And it's showing a variety of different dogs. Well, you're welcome to call that divergent evolution, but giving it a fancy name doesn't change the facts. It's still a dog, isn't it?
Your understanding lacks depth, and that's because instead of reading the book, you look at the pretty pictures and occasionally glance at their captions. Divergence is one of the cornerstones of evolution. It's really simple. No sexually reproducing organism is a perfect copy of its parents. As such, its allele frequencies have changed. Not by much, but enough to give the organism a completely unique genotype. Given enough generations, the descendants of this organism will have diverged from its ancestral genotype and each other sufficiently to make it impossible for them to interbreed, the very definition of speciation. What the picture is illustrating is that dogs are continuously diverging into different subgroups, and that eventually their descendants will not be able to interbreed. Yes, they'll still be dogs, just as they'll still be mammals, just as they'll still be vertebrates, just as they'll still be animals. And if we're unlucky enough to still have creationists by then, they'll be howling in disbelief at the idea that the common ancestor of those creatures was today's dog.
And that's not really evolution. Variations do happen. There's no question about it. There's a variety of cows in the world, a variety of horses in the world, a variety of dogs in the world, a variety of cats in the world. Variations happen. However, they don't cause evolution.
Yes, they do. Once again, if an organism's genotype diverges sufficiently, then the organism carrying that genotype will be unable to breed with other descendants of its ancestor.
Now, this book teaches that variations actually cause evolution. There we go. Variations actually cause evolution. Is that based on faith, or is that a fact? Faith. That's a faith-based statement, isn't it?
The very definition of evolution is contingent on variation.
And we don't want faith in the textbooks, do we? What do we need to do with this? We need to take that out of the textbook, because that has nothing whatsoever to do with real science, okay? Now, evolution is based on two faulty assumptions. First of all, evolution, according to evolution, they say, well, mutations change things, and then natural selection causes this change to take over the whole population.
Your grasp of these two concepts is childishly simplistic, but let's see where you're going with this.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Now, do mutations happen? Yes. Here's a mutated bull. It's a bull with 5 legs. It's got an extra leg growing out of its back. It's mutated. But is that a beneficial mutation? Does that help out the bull at all? Can he run any faster with that extra leg? No, it ain't helping the bull at all. So, it's not a beneficial mutation. It doesn't help anything. Here's a short-legged sheep. It's a mutation, but it's not a beneficial mutation. Why? When the wolf comes running after him, he's the first one that's going to get caught, man, because he can't run fast enough. The wolf is going to come, and the sheep are going to take off running. They're going to look back and say, "Oh, Herman didn't make it." Well, he can't run fast enough. Of course he's not going to make it. Here's a mutated turtle. He's mutant, but not ninja, okay? We got a mutated turtle. They say beneficial mutations cause evolution. The problem is there are no beneficial mutations.
Wrong. Your grasp of what a mutation is really is childishly simplistic. Humans alone have an average of at least 130 mutations in their bodies, and that's just without the influence of epigenetics. A mutation is defined as the change in an organism's DNA. Whether that mutation causes an extra head to grow or an extra cytosine nucleotide to arise during development is irrelevant. Once again, Eric, you're not a perfect copy of either of your parents. This fact is attributed to mutations.
Check out this textbook. It says, boys and girls, normal fruit flies have 2 wings. This mutant has 4. This rare mutations, like most, is harmful. Then it says, beneficial mutations are the material for natural selection. Well, then why didn't they show us an example of a beneficial mutation?
You want an example? Here are a few that we've observed in the last 50 years. HIV-resistant individuals, lactose tolerance, radioactive-resistant fungi, the German superboy, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and apoplexia-resistant mountain dwellers, to name a few.
Because there aren't any. Now, they teach the kids in the books that beneficial mutations actually cause evolution.
No, they don't. Mutations in general cause evolution. They don't necessarily have to be beneficial.
Is that a fact, or is that a faith-based statement? That's a faith-based statement. We don't want faith in the textbooks, do we? So what should we do about that? We need to take that out of there, yeah, because we certainly don't want faith mixed in our science textbooks, okay? They say natural selection causes evolution.
Nobody says that. You're just coming up with another straw man. How pathetic that the only substitute that you have for an intelligent statement is a logical fallacy.
No. Natural selection can't cause anything to happen. Natural selection can only act on the biologic properties that already exist. It can't create something brand new. Natural selection isn't some magical, mystical creator that can make something brand new for us. Now, they tell us natural selection causes evolution. Is that a fact? Or is that what they believe? Is that a faith-based statement?
Neither, because no one believes that.
That's a faith-based statement. We don't want that in our books, do we? So what do we need to do about that? We need to take that one out of the books, don't we? You kids are liking this, aren't you? Ripping up the textbooks. Don't do that with yours, because you got to pay for it, okay? It's definitely a faith-based statement. Hey, you guys ever get these? They tell the kids, think critically. Yes, boys and girls, think critically. Do you think that humans are still evolving? What kind of a question is that? That's not telling the kids to think critically. That's like me saying, hey, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Think critically. The question assumes something, doesn't it?
I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. I'll leave my subscribers to tackle you on this one.
And today in the textbooks, they are doing a great job of telling the kids what to think and deceiving the kids rather than teaching them how to think. In the evolution chapter in the textbooks, they say we've got evidence of evolution from structure called comparative anatomy. Some of you guys have probably already learned this. Comparative anatomy proves evolution.
Nothing proves evolution, just as nothing proves gravity. Comparative anatomy presents compelling evidence for evolution.
Here's what they do for the kids. They show them a whole bunch of pictures of different animals and their forelimbs and show how their forelimbs are very similar to each other. They say, boys and girls, there it is. Boys and girls, a human has two wrists in his forearm.
Those are not wrists, those are bones.
A radius and an ulna. Boys and girls, the cat has two bones in his forearm. Guess what they're called? Radius and ulna. Boys and girls, the whale has got two bones in his forearm, the forearm of his flipper. Guess what they're called? Radius and ulna. Are you catching on?
I am catching on, and I maintain my earlier position that you're a moron. The evidence for evolution from comparative anatomy comes from the structures and function of these organs, not from their names.
They had a common ancestor. They all evolved from the same thing. Wait a minute. Couldn't that be evidence of a common designer?
No, because that explanation is neither consistent with what we know, nor is it parsimonious. One can adopt the position that an intelligence oversaw and guided evolution, but that is the extent to which one can posit an intelligent designer without delving into pseudoscience.
Wouldn't that make a little bit more sense than a common ancestor? Hey, did you know that both Ford and General Motors put 4 wheels on most of their vehicles? Guess what they call them? Tires. That proves they evolved from a skateboard 20 million years ago. It's obvious evidence right there.
False analogy. Cars are not reproductive organisms and hence are not subject to the laws of population genetics.
It doesn't make sense, does it? Comparative anatomy is evidence of design.
Wrong again. Evidence of a designer would be something along the lines of similar structures being formed by completely different nucleotide combinations, when in fact the differences are relatively marginal. Worse still, as one goes down the Linnaean taxonomy, one finds that certain morphological features are unique to each branch, showing a clear progression of common ancestry.
Not evidence of evolution. Now you're welcome to say in the books, comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution. But is that a fact or is that faith? That's faith-based. We don't want that in the textbook, do we? So we better make sure and get rid of that one, all right? They also say we have evidence from development. Whoa! Evidence from development? Yeah, they say the human embryo, when it's inside the mother, goes through the stages of evolution.
No, they don't. That idea was dismissed in 1910. What the science really says is that the development in different organisms are parallel and that all fetuses have gill slits and tails at some point.
Starts off as a fish, then amphibian, then reptile, then mammal. F-A-R-M, farm. Fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. That way you can remember it for the quiz, okay? So they say the human embryo inside the mother goes through those stages. No, I don't think so. You know, Darwin said that the similarity in the early stages of development of the different embryos of, dog, cats, horses, all these different things, humans, he said this was great evidence that we shared a common ancestor. Evolution. He later said this was his strongest single class of evidence in favor of his theory. Whoa! Let me give you the truth on this one. Ernst Haeckel is the guy who came up with embryology. He said his turning point in thinking was when he read Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species. Interesting. Well, Darwin in his book said if evolution is true, there'll be lots of evidence. Well, 10 years later, they hadn't exactly found any. So Haeckel decided to help him out a little bit.
Bullshit. Archaeopteryx was discovered merely 2 years after Darwin published Origins.
And he made up some evidence. He took a dog embryo at 4 weeks and a human embryo at 4 weeks and drew them to look exactly alike.
While Ernst Haeckel was a fraud and his idea that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny was based on bad evidence, nobody subscribes to his views or even considers the drawings that he put forth.
He faked the drawings. Wow. He did this with several different animals, faked the drawings of what they really look like. He then went around, traveled around, and converted a lot of people to believing in evolution because of his fake drawings.
Liar. He was convicted of fraud 5 years after his publication. Besides, even if Haeckel's drawings weren't fake, they alone did not constitute even a fraction of the evidence that supported evolution.
Wow. Guess what? A few years later, in 1874, he was convicted of fraud at his own university.
Oh, so you did know that. You slimy little worm.
Yeah. However, guess what is still in textbooks, in some textbooks, not all, but in some textbooks today? His fake drawings. They are still in some textbooks today as evidence of evolution.
Lying again, are we, Eric? What textbooks show are microphotographs that depict fetuses during development and demonstrate that different organisms develop analogously. The picture that you just showed, this one, is an illustration of those microphotographs. These are not Haeckel's drawings, you worm.
Whoa! Check out this textbook. It says, by 7 months, the fetus from the outside looks like a tiny, normal baby, but it is not. Wait a minute. Not a baby at 7 months? My brother was born at 7 months. You want to step up and talk to me about how he's not a baby? Come on. That's what they're telling him. This textbook says the human embryo has gills like a fish.
No one claims that those are real functioning gills, only that they're morphologically indistinguishable from gills and that all fetuses gain them at some point.
Whoa, gills like a fish? That's not true. Actually, those are folds of skin that later develop into be parts of the ear and parts of the throat. They have nothing whatsoever to do with evolution. Nothing to do with evolution. Now, you're welcome to believe that embryology is evidence of evolution. However, is that a fact or is that a faith-based statement? That's a faith-based statement.
You completely missed the point, Eric. Let's recap. No one accepts Haeckel's idea or his drawings that support his idea. His erroneous idea is as follows, that fetuses evolve through their development. Nobody accepts this to be true. What embryology does show us is that a bird, a dog, a reptile, and a human undergo analogous development, which is evidence for a common ancestor. This field of study is so rich that an entire discipline, Devo, formed from it.
What are we going to do about that? We need to take it out, don't we? We do not want that embryology junk in there because it is not evidence of evolution. Now, let me tell you how they're kind of tricking us up here. They're actually taking that out of the student editions in some places and just talking about it just a little bit, not showing the pictures. But then they're putting it on CD-ROMs and in the teacher's edition so the teacher can show it to the kids. That way it's not officially in the textbooks, but the teacher can still teach that lie of embryology, okay? And it's a faith-based statement. That's all there is to it, okay? Now, why do they keep this lie in the textbooks? Very simple. That's the only scientific way to justify an abortion.
Once again, you display your astounding ignorance. There are a multitude of ways to justify abortion, not only scientifically, but also ethically. Regardless of what your position on abortion is, it is intellectually dishonest to say that comparative embryology makes any statement for or against abortion, and it's even more unscrupulous of you to insinuate that there is a conspiracy afoot to teach kids a politically loaded message in science class.
To say it's not human yet. I'm sorry. It's human from conception. That's when it becomes a human, okay? Right there at conception. Abortion is just plain murder. And they keep that lie in these books so that they can scientifically justify having an abortion. Oh, it's just in the fish stage. Don't worry about it. It's not really a human. We're not really killing a human. Wow. The Bible says, "Cursed be he that taketh reward to slay an innocent person." And all the people shall say, Amen. That's exactly right. "These 6 things that the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood."
You want to start preaching? 2 can play at that game. Numbers 5 clearly gives a ritual in which an adulterous woman who is pregnant can perform an abortion. While the verse is filled with mystical nonsense involving a magic abortion potion, the fact remains that your God clearly has no problems with abortion.
Let me tell you something. Judgment Day is coming soon for those people, I guarantee you, okay? It's going to happen. What about vestigial structures? Are those evidence of evolution?
Yes, we contain baggage from our ancestors, among them the appendix. Not only is the appendix vestigial, it's downright harmful to our health. Before the appendectomy procedure was developed in the mid-1700s, an inflamed appendix was a death sentence. This is not the work of an intelligent designer, but it is evidence that we descended from organisms that utilize this structure.
This textbook tells the kids, boys and girls, the humans have an appendix that is no longer necessary. It's vestigial. And that's evidence of evolution. Is that really evidence of evolution? I mean, the idea that you used to need something and you don't need it anymore? No, that would be the opposite of evolution. That's losing something, not gaining something.
Evolution means change, not losing or gaining. You're picturing evolution as something that makes organisms bigger, faster, and stronger, but these traits are not always ideal. Natural selection is what decides whether something is gained or lost.
So, vestigial structures do not prove evolution. That's not fact, is it? That's faith-based, isn't it? And we don't want faith in the textbook, so of course we need to tear that one out. There are no vestigial organs, okay? Even if there were vestigial organs, that's the opposite of evolution. That's not helping evolution out. Check this out. They say the whale has a vestigial pelvis and femur from when it used to walk around on land. What? Yeah, the whale has a vestigial pelvis and femur. Check this textbook out. Just imagine whales walking around. It's true. Imagine the whale walking around on land. Okay, here's what they're talking about, the vestigial pelvis and femur on a whale. Now, we happen to have in our museum a whale vertebrae. I brought it here with me. A whale vertebrae. This is one of the vertebrae out of the back of a whale. He didn't need it anymore, so we took it from him. This is one of those bones that they're referring to. Grab this. There's the bone. Yes, boys and girls, just imagine whales walking around. I'm having a hard time imagining that, okay?
That's because, once again, your understanding lacks depth. You're picturing a modern-day whale with short cartoon-like legs, but we know that the ancestors of whales were hyena-like in morphology. That vertebrae is orders of magnitude larger than a vertebrae possessed by the ancestors of whales who utilized that pelvis.
Whales walking around, yeah. I don't think that represents reality. Oop, let me knock that over. According to evolution, it should have stood up by itself, but it didn't. That's weird. Can you imagine whales walking around? No. That is not a fact statement. Matter of fact, those bones in the whale have nothing to do with walking around on land. Those bones are actually where some muscles attached to so that the whales can reproduce. It helps them do that, okay? So those bones have nothing to do with walking around on land. It has to do with making more baby whales.
I realize that you might be confused when people refer to this as a boner, but that does not mean that the penis is attached to a bone. Incidentally, you'll find that female whales also have those vestigial pelvises. Do they also get boners?
That's not evidence of evolution. Now, you're welcome to teach the kids that the whale pelvis and femur is a vestigial structure from when they walked around on land. But is that real science? Is that a fact? Or is that just an interpretation of the fact based on faith? That's a faith-based statement, isn't it? And we certainly don't want faith-based statements in our textbooks. Hey, also in the textbooks, they are doing lots and lots of these now called cladograms, where they show the kids all the different things, and then they got the lines connecting them. All these cladograms are in the books just to try to help kids believe in evolution. The lines represent nothing except what's going on in the imagination of their mind. Here's the typical tree of life in the textbooks. Yes, boys and girls, we all had a common ancestor. Great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa bacteria. Yes, there he is right there. And then slowly over billions of years, humans formed out of that. And they got all these lines connecting these different images. They got cladograms all throughout the textbooks trying to show and trying to get the kids to believe in evolution.
Those make up an accurate model of how evolution created the biodiversity that we see today. Not only does Linnaean taxonomy, which concerns itself with the morphology of life forms, clearly show direct links between different organisms, but it's cross-confirmed by phylogenetic cladistics, which concerns itself with relating different genotypes. I noticed that at no point in this seminar did you attempt to tackle the strongest piece of evidence for evolution, phylogeny. The fact that the DNA in our bodies can be demonstrated to have originated from the same basal forms that eventually gave rise to other organisms is, for me, the thickest nail in the coffin of creationism.
But is that a fact-based statement or image, or is that a faith-based image? It's faith-based, isn't it? We don't want that in the textbooks, do we? And they actually go all through the textbooks and do that. You say, Eric, what's the point? Okay, so we got a lot of faith in here. By the way, I want you to notice, if you were to take all the faith-based statements out, you still have a lot of good science left, don't you? People say, you can't take evolution out of the science books. Evolution is the foundation for science.
Evolution is not the foundation of science, but it is the cornerstone of biology. Evolution unites paleontology, anatomy, biophysics, neuroscience, biogeology, genetics, ecology, psychology, botany, and a myriad of other disciplines into a sublime model with predictive power whose strength rivals that of quantum theory. Taking evolutionary theory out of biology is like taking competitive equilibrium theory out of economics, or gravitational theory out of astronomy. These are the centerpieces of their respective fields, and the only people who are stupid enough to demand their revocation are fundamentalist zealots like you who would rather bask in comfortable delusions than to face up to the fact that you are as much a part of the universe as it is a part of you.
No, it's not. Evolution has nothing to do with science. It's a faith-based religion that has crept its way into the science textbooks, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with science. And evolution is a dangerous religion. It has led people to do some unbelievable things. Because according to evolution, there is no right, there is no wrong, there are no moral absolutes. You can do whatever you want to.
Evolution doesn't make any statements about morality other than how it originated. And incidentally, it's not a religion because it comes with no doctrines, ideologies, mythological baggage, or rituals. As for evolution causing people to do horrible things, don't even think about going down that route. I hardly need remind you that it isn't rationalists who are flying planes into buildings, blowing up abortion clinics, ostracizing homosexuals, threatening others with barbaric punishments for being different, or conducting holy wars. I also hardly need to mention that societies filled with scientifically literate individuals tend to be more peaceful and progressive than their barbarian counterparts. You epitomize everything that is wrong with religious fundamentalism. While you hypocritically reap the rewards of a humanist mindset, you gleefully point the way back to the Dark Ages. This is the aggregate of the attitude of fundamentalism. Let everyone else suffer as long as you guarantee yourself a spot in heaven. I'm sure Jesus would be proud.
According to evolution. And the truth is, Satan is using the idea of evolution to deceive people about what God's Word says. And he's using evolution to send people straight to hell. That's a problem. I don't know if you realize this, 75% of kids who grow up in a Christian home attend public school and then a public university. After 1 year in college, 75% of them will reject their faith in Christianity. We're losing 75%.
And it's not because of evolution. It's because of pig-headed charlatans like you who try to stuff your fairy tales down other people's throats. People don't like being lied to, and seeing as that's all a fundamentalist can do, you're alienating your congregations. Moderates blame you and your ilk for poisoning your institutions, and rightly so. I've witnessed firsthand the madness that your literalist doctrine inspires, and it makes me sick. It makes me sick that such arrogant nitwits as you think that they're right about everything when in fact the exact opposite is true, and then you use your undeserved authority that you alone have given yourself to promote an exclusionary, bigoted, self-righteous worldview. Whether religion dies or not is, for the most part, irrelevant to me. All that I care about is the death of fundamentalism, the death of your way of thinking. Ironically, in trying to be as devout as possible, you've become a cancer to your own faith. If you and your ilk continue, I have no doubt that Christianity will eventually be regarded with the same dismissive tone as Osiris is. And if that day does come, Eric, if the day comes that Christianity does indeed die, just remember, it was your fault.
It's not because of the good science. It's because of the lies that have been mixed in there with them. It's because of the faith that goes in there that gets kids to believe in the faith, the religion of evolution, rather than real science. So, is evolution based on facts or is it based on faith? Faith. It's based on faith. That's exactly right. Hey, thank you for joining me. We'll see you for session 6. God bless.
Rate, comment, and subscribe. The final session will be released 3 videos from now.